Let's speak to Dr. Elisabeth Kendall, who's an expert in the Middle East and Yemen and the head of Girton College at Cambridge University. Good morning.
Good morning.
In the very long and bloody history of violence in the Middle East between Israel and the Palestinian people, how would you assess the significance of October the 7th and then the subsequent war?
The significance of October the 7th was massive. I think it's going to come down to us as one of the turning points in Middle East history and the knock-on effects that will have around the world. And 1 year on now, many of our worst fears have come to pass. And the hope was that this conflict could be contained to Israel and Palestine, possibly even solved. Now we have Lebanon brought in, not just from the air, but also from the ground. We have Yemen with the Houthis aggressively mobilized. We have Syria and Iraq with their Shia militias, Iran directly, and the US and the UK actively bombing Yemen. So, in short, I think the Middle East is less secure, Israel is less secure, and this could even broaden out into a more complicated war than we currently see. So it could get worse.
How much of Israel's response to October the 7th can we put down to Benjamin Netanyahu as Prime Minister and the politics of the country?
I think it's true to say that Netanyahu has been very much influenced by domestic political considerations relating to his own grip on power. And if we were to look very objectively, it's clear that Israel is less secure and that it's not the case for tactical military wins against Iran's so-called axis of resistance, like pummeling Hamas in Gaza or like decapitating Hezbollah in Lebanon, will necessarily lead to positive long-term strategic outcomes for Israel or for the region. And the policies that Netanyahu has put in place, with tens of thousands of civilians killed and around 3 million displaced, if you add up both Palestine and Lebanon, are not conducive to long-term peace, whether or not one agrees with Netanyahu's tactics and the concept of collective punishment. This is likely to backfire and to generate long-term cycles of revenge, probably expanding Israel's enemy base.
The French president, Emmanuel Macron, has called on countries to stop selling arms to Israel that are being used in Gaza. Now, significant that he's made that call, but ultimately he's talking to the US, right? The big Israeli backers. And how significant then is the American presidential election in a month's time on the future course of what happens in the Middle East?
Yes, I think the US election is very significant in what's happening at the moment. I think that's for two reasons. One, it's because the US administration currently is extremely wary of stirring things up too much with Israel by putting its foot down too hard and putting pressure on Netanyahu in the run-up to a vote in just a month's time from now. And also because Netanyahu and the Israeli administration are probably pretty keen to get done whatever they can get done before a new United States administration comes into power. We know that neither the Trump nor the Harris potential administrations would want to inherit this level of aggression from an ally that they are arming and funding, whilst also trying to build bridges in the Middle East.
What does the next year look like? And given that so many diplomatic partners are calling for a two-state solution, what is the actual appetite for it in the places where it matters, in the Gaza Strip, in Palestine territory, and in Israel?
I think there's a huge appetite for a two-state solution in the Arab world itself, and we've been hearing that at the United Nations General Assembly. I don't think there's much appetite for it under the Netanyahu administration. But in terms of what happens next, well, violence breeds violence, and I think we can expect worse over the year to come. Probably one of the only off-ramps we have is for more pressure to be brought to start taking seriously the idea of a two-state solution. Otherwise, we could just see this spiral out into more of an all-out war for Israel on its many fronts, and the axis of resistance on the part of Iran, perhaps resorting to targets that are not just Israel-focused, but also focused more heavily on Israel's supporters, especially the United States and other Western countries.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. That's Dr. Elisabeth Kendall from Cambridge University, an expert in the Middle East and Yemen.